So that does it for the news. Justin, let's talk about real quick the other games we've been playing. I've not touched much. I've just been playing Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
You said real quick. I could talk about this game for hours, man.
Yeah, I am going to be interested to see, like, it's interesting. I re-listened to, like, my thoughts on it last week, having been, 12 hours in, and I put about another 12 hours. I'm about, like, 23, 24 hours in at this point. How far are you, man? I know you have just been, like, nose to the desk playing this game.
I am just below 40 hours.
Okay.
I am almost done, I believe, with Chapter 4, and my level is level 49, and I've stopped putting the extra bonus levels in because you can, like, basically rest at your campsites. Yeah. I stopped doing that, and I highly recommend that everyone also stops doing that, and they try to stay as close as they can to the level of the main quest as possible. Otherwise, you're going to be wasting time more with your fights than you would be if you're trying to keep close to the level of the missions. So with that in mind, I played a ton of it, and I love it just as I did before.
It has clicked with me now that, like, I'm actually playing the game. Because you were right. I was sort of on the cusp of, like, it actually turning into the game that it is.
Yeah.
I still think it, and as you agreed with me last week, is like, that's still not a great first impression for people who are new to it, or even people who are seasoned veterans. Like, I imagine you probably wanted to, like, get into it a little bit quicker, would you say?
Yeah, I wanted new combat wrinkles earlier. And it was a very slow burn to get to those new combat wrinkles. But also, I still think the speed of it is kind of necessary with how much there is in this game.
Agreed. It's a fucking lot. I think I have actually benefited from writing about it because I'm doing guides for it. And just to look behind the curtain at how guides are made, there are different guides you're going to need for different sort of games, right? I thought that this game was going to be like a standard open world guide game about, like, here's where all of these collectibles are located. Here's how to do this quest. Here's how to do that. Not true, because the quests are pretty straightforward. They're either collectible quests, which suck, or kind of interesting story quests. But the real guides are about tutorials and how to actually play the game, because I don't think that the game necessarily does a great job telling you, like, hey, here's what's important. Here's, like, an important tutorial about, like, what you need to know, and here's we're gonna give you 4 pages about how to cook, and the cooking is nothing. I mean, it just like buffs you. Like, I don't even know why you need 4 pages about it.
And the cooking is ingredients have, meal, make. That's it. Like, you don't have to, like, do
select. Yeah, it's like 3 clicks. Whereas Master Arts have a single page in the tutorial, and, like, I understand why it didn't click with me. Why certain aspects of it didn't click, because it was just like, oh, I didn't understand this because the game didn't really tell me this. So now, having done a lot of, like, additional research on, like, oh, here's how this system works, the chain order thing, which I think is a really great system, which is like the team attacks. It's a great system. The tutorial is pretty good, but actually sitting down and being like, how does this work? Watching a video, reading a guide, whatever, is going to give you a much, much better understanding than the game gives you. I understand it's trying to be, like, quick and snappy with its tutorials and stuff, but with systems as dense and as deep as these, I think maybe a little bit more text would have probably been appreciated. Although, I guess it's tough to say, because I don't think that the way that the text is written in this game is particularly informative or helpful. So having more of that probably wouldn't be what I would really gel with. But what I'm trying to say is, if you are not clicking with this game, I might suggest doing a little bit of research on, like, how these things work and breaking the individual mechanics into smaller components and then adding them all up and going, like, oh, here's how all this works in harmony together. Does that make sense? Would you agree?
Yeah. Have you really, like, dived into the tips in the tutorial section in the game? Like, once you get, like, a new mechanic, like using one of the main combat mechanics, interlocking in this game. Once you get through that, and then you go to, like, you're back in the open world, they usually open up these tutorials and stuff like that I thought were pretty good and helpful with that. Did you find those helpful, or do you still find those lacking?
They are better than just the text boxes because they have you do them. They have you like do the actual thing in order to move on, which I find to be helpful. But I still don't think that they go as in depth as you would want. For example, there's, like I said, I was trying to learn about master arts. There is really nothing in the video game that explains how master arts work. There's not one of those like actual like real tutorials about them. There's not really much information on how to like gain new ones that's like actually provided in the game. So yes, I do think that those are helpful because I did spend some time looking at like, oh, here's how to like attack cancel, because that's actually like a huge aspect of the game that I was missing up until I had auto battle on, and I was like, oh, that's the timing of how it works. Yeah, so like I think those do help, especially with those more active roles and active things that you want to be doing. But in terms of like actually explaining like, hey, here's how this works, I still think it's a little bit lacking.
And even on top of that, like you need so many different tutorials because basically each master art powers up differently, and like there's different requirements to do that for each class, each master art, each. There's so many like wrinkles and like, well, but in this case you need to do this, but in this case you need to do this, but it's still basically this, but however it's this kind of thing. It's like a branching tree of confusion. Yeah, there's a lot of systems in this game.
Yes, and where like I know that people, I don't know, like if I'm just like thinking about like bad faith comments on that, it's like, oh, so you need everything to be hand fed to you? You must not like Elden Ring. And it's like, no, because like I think those systems, yes, they are obtuse, but like you learn them through experimentation, and you go like, oh, that's how that works. Whereas in this game, it's like the systems are crucial to being able to actually play the video game. You know, and it's not something like you can experiment around with and go like, oh, I understand how I did that. It's like, I don't know what the meaning of that was, you know?
Kind of to speak to your point too, one thing that I was struggling with was unlocking character classes for my other characters. And I was like, how do you do this? And then I looked at a video and it was like, you got to make sure that you're fighting people who are like leveled higher than you. And that's the best way to do it. Because I was so over leveled that if you're fighting, like, I think I was like level 40 and I was fighting things that were like in the mid 20s, and your classes and your level go up much slower at those, like, if there's a big gap. So they incentivize you to seek out those like challenging bosses and those legendary bosses that are higher. And then what happened at that point is I started over-leveling even more, and then all my classes were maxed out, which is, I think, fine. I didn't know about that till I really, like, went to an outside source video to be like, oh, that's why it's been taking forever. Because there was a part in the game when I was the same classes for, like, a big portion of the game just because I couldn't level them up to get, like, unlock other ones.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that makes, and that's the thing too. I think talking about it with like people being like, "Oh, is this how this works?" Oh, okay. You know, is really helpful. So I think that if you are a newcomer to this series and into these sorts of games, playing with some guides open can be helpful. If you feel like you would like it, otherwise, I might say like maybe steer clear, because like this is a commitment of a game.
I would say though that it's not different from other RPGs, because I do think a lot of other RPGs out there do have these like deep system, like Pokemon. Very simply, you can get through Pokemon by just playing the game.
Correct.
But then there's the EVs, IVs, all the other different stuff, and all this like complex garbage that I, as someone who's played almost every Pokemon series, like still doesn't understand.
Right. And
I've
the game
tried.
And the game has no interest in telling you that stuff, or even like explaining like, hey, here's how stats work. You know, you know, you can put it together by just looking at it. But if you are truly trying to understand it, it is not something that the game is willing to do for you.